I'm Rebecca Davis, 28 years old, and last Sunday at our family barbecue, my life imploded in the most public way possible. My grandmother Evelyn stood up, glass raised high, and announced to everyone, "Rebecca, your car loan's fully paid now. $12 is no joke, but you're worth it." I blinked in confusion. "Grandma, I don't even have a car." The table went silent, and right then, my sister Haley waltzed in, dangling brand new keys. Let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to hear how my family's betrayal led to the most shocking revelation of my life. To understand why Grandma's announcement hit me like a freight train, you need to know about my family. I've been a registered nurse at Memorial Hospital for 6 years now, working night shifts and overtime just to chip away at my mountain of student loans. $60,000 in debt doesn't disappear overnight, especially on a nurse's salary in our small Midwestern town. Every month, I'd make my payment and watch that number decrease by what felt like pennies. My grandmother Evelyn has always been the family matriarch. At 78, she still maintains the sprawling farmhouse where my mom grew up, hosts every holiday, and keeps meticulous track of everyone's business. Grandma inherited good money from my grandfather's insurance policy when he passed 10 years ago. Plus, she owned 3 rental properties that generated steady income. She wasn't wealthy by national standards, but in our town, she was comfortable enough to help family when needed. And she did help, selectively. Then there's my younger sister, Haley. At 25, she works as a marketing assistant for a local real estate company. Haley has always been the golden child. Prettier, more social, and frankly, Grandma's favorite. Where I'm practical and reserved, Haley is spontaneous and charming. She majored in communications and graduated with minimal student debt because Grandma covered most of her tuition. When I asked Grandma for the same help during nursing school, she said, "Rebecca, you're smart and responsible. You'll figure it out." And so I did, through loans and night shifts. This dynamic wasn't new. Growing up, Haley received dance lessons while I got library books. She got a MacBook for high school graduation. I got a $100 gift card. Mom and Dad tried to be fair, but their budget only stretched so far. And Grandma's selective generosity created an imbalance they couldn't correct. My current car situation made this whole scenario even more painful. For the past 3 years, I've been driving a 2007 Honda Civic with 210,000 miles that constantly needed repairs. Last month, the transmission finally gave out, and the mechanic said fixing it would cost more than the car was worth. Since then, I've been taking the bus to work and saving every penny for a down payment on something reliable. No one in my family had offered to help, not even Grandma, though she knew about my situation. Our annual family barbecue at Grandma's house is a tradition going back decades. Everyone attends, my parents Laura and Thomas, Aunt Margaret and Uncle Robert with my cousin Jessica, Grandma's partner Harold, plus various neighbors and friends who've become honorary family members. Typically held in early June when Grandma's garden is in full bloom, it's an all-day affair with lawn games, too much food, and inevitable family drama. This year's barbecue seemed normal at first. Mom was arranging her famous potato salad on the picnic table. Dad and Uncle Robert were arguing about the proper way to grill chicken. Aunt Margaret was fussing over the placement of silverware, while my cousin Jessica helped Grandma bring out pitchers of lemonade. Harold dozed in the shade, his straw hat pulled low. The only person missing was Haley, who texted she'd be fashionably late as usual. I arrived early to help set up, hoping my dedication would be noticed. I'd worked a 12-hour night shift, gone home to shower and change, then headed straight to Grandma's. Exhaustion pulled at my eyelids, but I smiled through it, arranging chairs and hanging string lights around the patio. When Grandma asked about my transportation troubles, I mentioned I was close to having enough saved for a down payment on a used Toyota. "Public transportation is so unreliable," I said, trying to keep any hint of complaint from my voice, "but I should have enough saved by the end of summer." Grandma nodded thoughtfully but offered no comment or assistance. It stung a little, but I was used to it. What I didn't know was that the real pain was yet to come. As everyone settled around the massive outdoor table laden with barbecue and side dishes, I allowed myself to relax. The warm June air carried the scent of grilled meat and freshly cut grass. Fireflies were just beginning to emerge as dusk approached, and the string lights cast a warm glow over the gathering. Despite everything, I felt hopeful. Maybe this would be the day my hard work was recognized. Maybe this would be when my family finally saw me. Little did I know that in the next few minutes, everything I thought I understood about my family would be turned upside down, leaving me questioning relationships I'd trusted my entire life. Dinner was in full swing when Grandma Evelyn stood up, clinking her glass with a fork to get everyone's attention. This wasn't unusual. She often made announcements or toasts at family gatherings. I was mid-bite into a piece of barbecued chicken when she cleared her throat dramatically. "I have something special to share tonight," she began, her voice carrying across the table. All conversation ceased as everyone turned to look at her. Grandma had that effect on people. When she spoke, others listened. She smiled broadly, looking directly at me. "Rebecca, your car loan's fully paid now. $12 is no joke, but you're worth it." The chicken turned to sawdust in my mouth. I slowly set down my fork, certain I'd misheard. Everyone at the table was smiling, some even clapping. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed, my voice barely audible. Grandma beamed. "You don't have to worry about that car loan anymore, sweetheart. I paid it off in full this morning, $12,000. The dealership said it was the newest model too." I felt heat rising in my cheeks as 24 pairs of eyes focused on me. My mind raced frantically, trying to make sense of her words. Had she confused me with someone else? Was this some elaborate joke? Grandma, I said louder, my voice cracking slightly. I don't even have a car. The table went completely silent. Forks hovered mid-air. My father coughed uncomfortably. Grandma's smile faltered, confusion crossing her face. Of course you do, she insisted. The blue one. The salesman sent me pictures yesterday. Right at that moment, the back gate swung open and my sister Haley made her entrance. She was dressed impeccably as always, hair perfectly styled, wearing designer sunglasses despite the fading daylight, and dangling from her perfectly manicured fingers was a set of car keys with a dealership logo keychain. Sorry I'm late, everyone, she called cheerfully. Had to get used to my new wheels. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more devastating. Every head swiveled from me to Haley, then back again. Understanding dawned on faces around the table. Aunt Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. My cousin Jessica muttered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Grandma stood frozen, her champagne glass still raised as her eyes darted between Haley and me. For once in her life, she seemed genuinely speechless. Haley, initially oblivious to the tension, finally sensed something was wrong. Her bright smile dimmed as she took in the scene. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice suddenly small. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely, choked with humiliation and betrayal. I sat perfectly still, hands clenched in my lap, fighting the urge to flee. My father broke the silence. "Haley, did you buy a new car recently?" "Yes." Her enthusiasm returned. "A 2025 Honda Civic, bright blue, fully loaded. Just picked it up yesterday." She dangled the keys again. "Want to see it? It's parked out front." "And how did you pay for this car?" Mom asked, her voice unnaturally controlled. Haley's smile wavered. "Well, Grandma helped with the down payment, and I got a really good loan. The dealership said my credit was excellent." Every word was another knife in my chest. I finally found my voice. "I need some air," I murmured, standing up so abruptly my chair nearly toppled backward. Without looking at anyone, I walked away from the table, past the carefully arranged flowers and twinkling lights, into the darkness of Grandma's vast backyard. Behind me, I could hear the commotion erupting, my mother's voice rising in question, my father's deeper tones demanding answers, Haley's confused protests and, cutting through it all, Grandma's sharp, authoritative commands for explanation. I reached the old oak tree at the far end of the property and leaned against it, gulping in the evening air. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. What had just happened? How was my name on a car loan I knew nothing about? And why had Grandma announced paying it off? As if it were some grand gesture of generosity toward me? After about 15 minutes, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned, half expecting Haley with some elaborate explanation. But it was my cousin Jessica. "Everyone's looking for you," she said softly. "I can't go back there right now," I replied, wrapping my arms around myself despite the warm evening. Jessica nodded. "I don't blame you." That was intense. "Did you know?" I asked. "About the car? The loan? Any of it?" "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "Nobody did, except apparently Haley and Grandma. But something's off. Grandma seems genuinely confused. And Haley," Jessica hesitated. "She's crying, saying there's been a misunderstanding. But Rebecca," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "You might want to check your credit report." My blood ran cold. "You think she used my identity?" "I don't know. But as a lawyer, I've seen cases like this before. Family members with access to personal information." She trailed off, letting me fill in the blanks. Eventually, I composed myself enough to return to the gathering. The festive atmosphere had evaporated entirely. Small groups stood whispering tensely. Haley was nowhere to be seen. My parents looked shell-shocked, sitting side by side but not speaking. Grandma approached me immediately, her face drawn with concern. "Rebecca, we need to get to the bottom of this. Right now." I nodded numbly, following her inside to her study, where the real nightmare would begin to unfold. Grandma's study had always been off-limits to us as children. The heavy oak door was typically closed, and we understood that her financial records and personal papers were private. Now, as I followed her into the sanctum, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching someone else's life unravel rather than my own. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing her desk. I complied silently, watching as she settled herself behind the massive desk and pulled out her reading glasses. "First things first," she said briskly. "Do you have any banking apps on your phone? Anything where you might see active loans in your name?" I nodded, pulling out my smartphone. My hands were still trembling slightly as I opened my credit monitoring app, a precaution I'd taken years ago after a hospital data breach. I hadn't checked it in months, confident in the automatic notifications that would alert me to any changes, except there were no notifications in my email, nothing flagging suspicious activity. I logged in, navigated to the active accounts section, and froze. There it was, an auto loan from Central State Bank, opened 30 days ago for $19,500 with a $7,500 down payment and $12,000 financed. The monthly payment was listed as $267.84 over 48 months. "It's here," I whispered, turning the phone so Grandma could see. "A car loan I never applied for." Grandma's lips thinned to a tight line. "How is that possible? Wouldn't they need your signature? Identification? They would need my social security number, date of birth, address." I said slowly, the horrible realization dawning, all information Haley would have access to. Memories began flooding back, Haley asking to use my laptop last Christmas because hers was acting up. The time she stayed at my apartment for a week after a breakup, with complete access to my mail and personal documents. The jokes she made about us looking enough alike to pass for twins despite being 3 years apart. I need to see what else is there, I muttered, scrolling through the app with increasing dread. 2 new credit cards opened in the past 3 months, both nearly maxed out. A furniture store financing agreement. A personal loan for home improvements. In total, nearly $30,000 of debt that wasn't mine. Grandma, I said, my voice cracking. I think Haley has been stealing my identity for months. Grandma's face had gone pale. Without a word, she picked up her desk phone and pressed a single button. Send Haley to my study, immediately. Her tone brooked no argument. While we waited, I continued investigating. I pulled up my credit report, discovering my once excellent score had plummeted nearly 100 points due to high utilization and multiple hard inquiries. I checked my email trash folder, finding dozens of deleted confirmation emails for accounts I never opened. Haley had accessed my email too, systematically erasing evidence of her fraud. The door opened, and Haley entered. Her makeup was smeared from crying, but her expression was defiant rather than remorseful. Sit down, Grandma ordered, pointing to the chair beside me. Haley complied, not looking in my direction. Explain, I said, turning my phone screen toward her, displaying the fraudulent accounts. It's not what it looks like, Haley began, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she'd used since childhood to get out of trouble. Really? Because it looks like identity theft and fraud, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded despite the rage and betrayal boiling inside me. I was going to pay it all back, she protested. You have such good credit. And mine was terrible after I missed some payments last year. The car was supposed to be temporary, just until I fixed my credit score. Then I'd refinance in my name, and you'd never know. Never know. I repeated incredulously. Haley, there's $30,000 of debt in my name. It's not that much, she muttered, looking down at her hands. Grandma, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. Haley Elizabeth Davis, are you telling me you committed fraud using your sister's information? Haley's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand how hard it's been for me. Rebecca has everything figured out. Great job. Perfect credit. I just needed a little help to get started. Help, I echoed, my voice rising. You call ruining my credit help? I've worked night shifts for 6 years to build that credit. I took the bus to work for a month because my car died, while you were driving around in a brand new Honda that I'm apparently paying for. Grandma was paying for it. Haley shot back as if that made everything better. I turned to Grandma. Did you know? When you gave her money for the down payment, did you know she was using my name for the loan? Grandma looked stricken. Absolutely not. Haley told me she was approved for financing based on her new job. I gave her the down payment as a graduation gift. Late, I know, but I wanted to help her establish independence. She fixed Haley with a hard stare. I had no idea she was establishing it by stealing from her sister. Haley began sobbing in earnest now. I was going to fix everything. The new job pays really well and I've been making all the payments. For 1 month, I pointed out coldly. What about the credit cards, the furniture loan? Were you making those payments too? Her silence was answer enough. I stood up, unable to sit beside her any longer. I need to go. I need to figure out how to undo all of this. Wait, Grandma said, reaching into her desk drawer. She pulled out a thick manila folder and placed it on the desk. There's more you need to see. As Haley's eyes widened in recognition of the folder, I realized the night's revelations were far from over. The manila folder sat between us like a bomb waiting to detonate. Grandma's weathered hands rested on top of it, and I noticed they were trembling slightly, something I'd never seen before. My indomitable grandmother, always so certain and commanding, suddenly looked every one of her 78. I need you both to understand something, she began, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. This folder contains information I've been gathering for the past several months. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, which is why I waited. Perhaps that was a mistake. She opened the folder and withdrew a stack of bank statements, spreading them across the desk. I recognized the letterhead of First National, where our family had banked for generations. Haley, these are the records from the account I set up for you when you graduated college. I deposited $20,000 as your start in life, the same amount I gave Rebecca when she finished nursing school. My head snapped up. What? I never received any money from you after graduation. Grandma's expression darkened. That's the first discrepancy I noticed. She slid a document toward me, a copy of a cashier's check made out to Rebecca Davis for $20,000, dated 6 years ago, with my signature on the endorsement line. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close, but there was formed differently, and the D had a loop I never used. I didn't sign this, I whispered, staring at the forged endorsement. I never received this money. Haley had gone completely still beside me, her sobbing abruptly silenced. Grandma continued, her voice gaining strength. When Rebecca mentioned financial struggles last Christmas, I was confused. The money I'd given her should have eliminated most of her student debt. So, I began investigating. She produced more documents, credit card statements in my name with charges for designer clothes and lavish vacations I'd never taken, withdrawal slips from my savings account that I hadn't authorized, loan applications with my forged signature. It appears, Grandma said carefully, that Haley has been systematically diverting funds intended for you and accessing your accounts for nearly 6 years. The room tilted around me. 6 years since the beginning of my nursing career. Every extra shift I'd worked, every vacation I'd skipped, every discount grocery store I'd shopped at to save money, all while Haley was siphoning away thousands of dollars that should have been mine. How much? I asked, my voice a hollow whisper. Grandma consulted a handwritten summary. By my calculations, approximately $87,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $87,000 would have paid off my student loans completely. It would have bought me a reliable car. It would have meant financial security instead of constant struggle. Haley, I turned to my sister who was now staring fixedly at the floor. How could you do this? When she finally looked up, I was shocked to see not remorse but resentment in her eyes. It's always been so easy for you, she spat. Perfect grades, perfect career, everyone's favorite nurse saving lives while I was just a pretty dumb sister selling houses. You didn't need the money like I did. Didn't need it? I repeated incredulously. I've been drowning in debt while you've been living off money stolen from me. You never noticed, she retorted. As if that justified everything. You were so busy with your important career, you never even checked your accounts properly. If Grandma hadn't stuck her nose in, that's enough. Grandma slammed her hand on the desk, making us both jump. Haley, what you've done isn't just immoral, it's criminal. Identity theft, fraud, forgery, these are serious offenses. You wouldn't press charges against your own sister, Haley scoffed, looking at me. The sad truth was, she was probably right. Despite everything, some part of me still remembered the little girl who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, terrified of the lightning. But that little girl was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. I need to leave, I said abruptly, standing up. The walls of the study felt like they were closing in. I can't, I need to process this. Grandma nodded, understanding in her eyes. Take these, she said, gathering the documents and placing them back in the folder. You'll need them to dispute the fraudulent accounts. As I took the folder, another question occurred to me. Grandma, how did you get all these records? Some of these are from my personal accounts. A faint blush colored her cheeks. I may have implied to certain bank managers that I had your permission. Being the town matriarch has its advantages. I'm sorry for the invasion of privacy, but I needed to know the truth. So Grandma had invaded my privacy too, albeit with better intentions than Haley. The betrayal felt multi-layered: my sister's deliberate theft, my grandmother's well-meaning but unauthorized investigation, and the family's years of obliviousness to it all. I walked out of the study without another word, passing through the living room where the rest of the family waited anxiously. Their conversations ceased as I appeared, folder clutched to my chest like a shield. Rebecca, my mother began, rising from the sofa. What's happening? What did Haley do? I couldn't answer. How could I explain that the daughter they thought they knew had been systematically stealing from her sister for years? That their family narrative of one responsible daughter and one free spirit was built on a foundation of fraud? Ask Haley, I managed, heading for the door. Or Grandma? I can't, not right now. I drove home in silence, the folder on the passenger seat beside me like an unwelcome companion. The world outside my windshield seemed surreal. People going about their normal evening activities, unaware that my entire life had just imploded. By the time I reached my small apartment, my shock had hardened into something colder and more resolute. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about years of deception, about a relationship built on lies. As I spread the documents across my kitchen table and began making notes, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Things could never go back to how they were before. At 2 in the morning, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I hadn't slept. How could I? Instead, I'd spent hours at my kitchen table, organizing Grandma's documents chronologically, creating a spreadsheet of unauthorized transactions, and researching identity theft recovery steps online. The more I discovered, the worse it became. Haley hadn't just stolen the $20,000 graduation gift. She'd opened credit cards in my name while I was still in nursing school. She'd diverted mail, intercepted tax refunds, and even taken out a personal loan for emergency medical expenses that coincided perfectly with her trip to Cancun 3 years ago. My phone had been mercifully silent until now, allowing me to work through the evidence undisturbed. But suddenly, it erupted with notifications, text messages, voicemails, and app alerts from nearly every member of my family. Mom, Rebecca, please call us. We're worried sick about you. Dad, your mother is in tears. Whatever happened, we can fix this as a family. Aunt Margaret, just heard what happened. Absolutely disgraceful. Call if you need anything. Uncle Robert, let me know if you need a lawyer. My golf buddy Phil specializes in this stuff. Cousin Jessica, don't do anything until we talk. I can help navigate the legal aspects. And then, most surprising of all, a message from Grandma. I've made arrangements for Haley to return everything. Come by the house tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bring the folder. The only person who hadn't messaged was Haley. I set the phone down, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of family concern. Where had all this support been when I was working double shifts to make loan payments? When I'd mentioned taking the bus to work because my car broke down? The family's sudden interest felt too little, too late. Still, I found myself typing a response to Jessica. She was a corporate attorney, not a criminal lawyer, but she'd understand the legal system better than I did. Me, still awake if you want to call. My phone rang seconds later. You should be sleeping, Jessica said by way of greeting. So should you. Fair point. She paused. How bad is it? I glanced at my spreadsheet. $87,000 and change, by my calculation, plus the credit damage. Jessica whistled low. And it's definitely Haley? Without question. She admitted it, Jess. Right in front of Grandma. She seemed more annoyed at being caught than sorry for what she did. That tracks, Jessica muttered. Listen, Rebecca, I need to ask you something difficult. Are you planning to press charges? The question hung in the air between us. I'd been avoiding it all night, focusing instead on the practical steps of recovery. I don't know, I admitted finally. Part of me thinks she deserves it. Another part remembers she's my sister. The sister who stole nearly $100 from you, Jessica reminded me gently. Yeah. I rubbed my eyes, fatigue finally catching up to me. What would happen if I did press charges? Jessica shifted into lawyer mode. Identity theft across this dollar amount is a felony. She could face substantial fines and potentially prison time. Best case scenario for her would be probation, restitution payments, and a permanent criminal record. The thought of Haley in prison made my stomach twist despite everything. And if I don't press charges, then she faces no legal consequences. You can still dispute the fraudulent accounts, but recovery becomes more complicated without a police report. And, Jessica added carefully, she could potentially do this to someone else in the future. That thought hadn't occurred to me. If Haley was capable of systematically defrauding her own sister for years, what would stop her from targeting others? Grandma messaged that she's arranged for Haley to return everything I said. Does that make a difference? Legally? Not really. The crimes were still committed, but it might factor into sentencing if you did pursue charges. Jessica paused. What does return everything even mean? She's spent most of the money, hasn't she? I assume Grandma is paying me back, I said, the realization dawning as I spoke. She feels responsible somehow. She did give Haley access to family finances, Jessica pointed out. And, she didn't notice the pattern for years. We talked for another hour, discussing practical steps. Jessica advised freezing my credit immediately, filing disputes with all 3 credit bureaus, and gathering evidence for a potential police report. She offered to accompany me to Grandma's house in the morning. After we hung up, I sat in my dark kitchen, staring at the scattered documents that represented years of betrayal. The hurt and anger remained, but now they were joined by something else, a cold, clear determination. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be a passive victim in my own life anymore. I spent the next hour implementing Jessica's advice, freezing my credit, changing all my passwords, and drafting dispute letters. As I worked, more messages arrived from family members ranging from supportive to accusatory. My cousin Mark, heard you're trying to get Haley arrested. Bit extreme, don't you think? My aunt's husband. Family matters should stay in the family. Lawyers just make everything worse. These messages stung, but they also strengthened my resolve. The family dynamics were becoming clearer. Some would prioritize peace over justice, expecting me to forgive and forget for the sake of harmony. They wanted the problem to disappear quietly, not for Haley to face real consequences or for me to receive real restitution. Around 4 in the morning, exhaustion finally won out. I gathered the documents into the folder and collapsed into bed, setting my alarm for 8. As I drifted toward uneasy sleep, one thought circled in my mind. Whatever decision I made in the coming days would permanently alter my relationship with my family. The Rebecca who had sought approval and acceptance was gone, replaced by someone who now understood the true value of standing up for herself, whatever the cost. Jessica picked me up at 9:30 the next morning, looking surprisingly professional in a blazer despite the early hour and weekend timing. I, on the other hand, had managed only to throw on jeans and a clean t-shirt, my hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Sleep had been elusive, and the little I'd gotten had been plagued by dreams of falling and being unable to catch myself. You look terrible, Jessica observed as I climbed into her car, the manila folder clutched to my chest. Thanks. That's exactly what I need to hear right now. She smiled apologetically. Sorry, just concerned. Did you sleep at all? Maybe 2 hours, I admitted. I kept thinking about what you said, about Haley potentially doing this to someone else if there are no consequences. Jessica nodded, pulling away from my apartment building. It's a valid concern. Financial crimes often escalate when unpunished. The drive to Grandma's house was short but tense. I decided not to make any final decisions about pressing charges until I heard what Grandma and Haley had to say, but I'd prepared questions and talking points based on Jessica's advice. Whatever happened, I wouldn't be manipulated or guilt-tripped into a resolution that left me holding the bag for Haley's crimes. Grandma's house looked different in the harsh morning light, less like the magical setting of childhood memories and more like what it was. An aging farmhouse with peeling paint and sagging gutters. The remnants of yesterday's barbecue had been cleaned up, the tables and chairs returned to storage, as if Grandma was trying to erase all evidence of the disastrous gathering. Several cars were parked in the driveway: my parents', Haley's new Honda, and an unfamiliar black sedan with a discreet Bennett Financial Services logo on the door. Grandma's called in reinforcements, Jessica murmured as we approached the front door. Before we could knock, the door swung open. Grandma stood there, her usual imposing presence somewhat diminished by the clear signs of a sleepless night mirroring my own. You brought Jessica, she observed, not sounding particularly surprised. That's probably wise. She's here as my cousin, not my lawyer, I clarified, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Grandma nodded, stepping aside to let us enter. Everyone's in the dining room. Everyone. I tensed. I'm not ready for a full family intervention, Grandma. Not everyone, she amended. Your parents, Haley, and Michael Bennett from the financial advisory firm. He's helping sort out the mess. I followed her through the house, Jessica close behind me. The dining room table, the same one where countless family holidays had been celebrated, was now covered with documents, laptops, and calculators. My parents sat on one side, both looking shell-shocked. Haley was at the far end, eyes downcast, a tissue crumpled in her hand. Across from my parents sat a middle-aged man in a crisp suit who rose when we entered. "Rebecca," he said, extending his hand. "Michael Bennett, your grandmother asked me to help facilitate this situation." I shook his hand automatically, still taking in the scene. "What exactly is this situation?" "Please sit down," Grandma directed, taking her place at the head of the table. "Michael has helped me develop a comprehensive plan to address everything." I sat cautiously, placing the folder in front of me. Jessica took the seat beside me, her presence bolstering my courage. "Before we begin," I said, making eye contact with each person at the table, "I want to be clear that I haven't decided whether to file a police report. I'm here to listen, but I'm not committing to anything yet." My mother made a small, distressed sound. My father placed his hand over hers. Haley continued staring at the table. Grandma nodded briskly. "Understood. Michael, please explain the plan." The financial advisor opened a leather portfolio. "Based on the documentation provided by your grandmother and our analysis conducted overnight, we've confirmed unauthorized transactions totaling approximately $92,000 over 6 years. The figure was even higher than my calculations. Additionally, there's the matter of credit damage and potential tax implications as some of the diverted funds were reported on your tax returns." He slid a document across the table to me. "This is a proposed restitution agreement. Miss Davis, Haley, acknowledges the full amount owed and agrees to repay it according to the following terms." I scanned the document, Jessica reading over my shoulder. It outlined a payment plan spanning 5 years with monthly installments of $1,500 directly deposited to a new account in my name. Additionally, Haley would surrender the new car to be sold, with proceeds applied to the debt. Most surprisingly, the agreement included a confession statement detailed enough to serve as evidence if I did decide to pursue legal action. "This is comprehensive," Jessica remarked, clearly impressed despite herself. "There's more," Grandma said. Her voice study turned to page 3. I flipped to the indicated page and found myself looking at a deed transfer. Grandma was signing over one of her rental properties, the small duplex on Maple Street, to me. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at her. "I failed you, Rebecca," Grandma said simply. "I gave Haley preferential treatment for years, and I didn't recognize what was happening under my nose. The property generates about $2,000 monthly in rental income. It's worth approximately $300,000. I'm transferring it to you, effective immediately." The room fell silent as I processed this. The property would provide steady income and significant equity, far more than the stolen amount. "Grandma, I can't accept this," I began. "You can and you will," she interrupted firmly. "It's not just about the money Haley took. It's about the years of inequality, the scholarship I gave her but not you, the car down payments, the rent I covered while she found her footing. You worked twice as hard for half the support, and that stops today." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for emotional reactions. "And what does Haley have to say about all this?" I asked, finally looking directly at my sister. Haley raised her head, her face blotchy from crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know that's not enough, but I am. It started small, just the graduation money because I was in trouble with some credit cards. Then it got easier each time." She wiped her eyes. "I've signed everything. The confession, the payment plan. I'm moving back home with Mom and Dad to save money for the payments. You stole from me for 6 years," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You watched me struggle financially, work overtime, skip vacations, all while you were living off money that should have been mine. And you're sorry now because you got caught." "Rebecca," my mother interjected, "she's still your sister." "Mom, not now," I said sharply. "This isn't about family loyalty. It's about theft and fraud on a massive scale." "Your mother's right that Haley is still your sister," Grandma said carefully. "But you're right that this goes beyond a simple family dispute. That's why I insisted on the confession statement. The choice to pursue legal action remains entirely yours, Rebecca." I looked at Michael Bennett. "What happens to this agreement if I do file a police report?" "It remains valid," he replied promptly. "It would likely be viewed favorably by prosecutors as an attempt at restitution, but it doesn't preclude criminal charges." I turned to Haley again. "Do you understand that? That I could still press charges even if I sign this?" She nodded miserably. "I know." Jessica explained it when she helped Grandma draft the confession. I shot a surprised look at Jessica, who shrugged. Grandma called me at midnight. I made sure the document would hold up legally either way. For the next hour, we went through every aspect of the agreement. Michael explained how my credit would be restored through formal disputes backed by Haley's confession. Grandma outlined the property transfer and the immediate steps she'd taken to freeze family accounts Haley had access to. My parents sat mostly silent, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but offering no defense of Haley's actions. Throughout it all, I maintained a detached, analytical approach, asking questions about tax implications, property management details, and enforcement mechanisms for the payment plan. Inside, however, emotions churned: hurt, betrayal, vindication, and beneath it all, a growing sense of power I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my life, the family dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the reliable daughter quietly accepting whatever scraps of attention came my way. I was the wronged party being actively courted for forgiveness. As Michael gathered the signed documents, Haley finally spoke directly to me without prompting. "Rebecca," she said softly, "I know you hate me right now, and you have every right to. But please believe me when I say I never meant for it to go this far. I studied my sister, the designer clothes she wore, the manicured nails, the carefully styled hair, all financed, at least in part, with money stolen from me. I don't hate you, Haley," I replied truthfully, "but I don't trust you either, and I don't know if I ever will again." As Jessica and I prepared to leave, Grandma pulled me aside in the hallway. "I meant what I said about failing you," she said, her voice uncharacteristically humble. I favored Haley because she reminded me of myself at that age, impulsive, social, struggling to find her way. "You were always so capable, so responsible. I mistook your self-sufficiency for not needing support. That's a painful way to be punished, for being reliable," I observed. Grandma nodded, genuine regret in her eyes. "I know, and I can undo those years, but I can try to make it right going forward." As we drove away from the house, Jessica glanced at me. "So, what are you going to do? About pressing charges?" I gazed out the window at the passing neighborhoods, considering the question that had kept me awake all night. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But for the first time, I feel like I'm the one making the decision, not just reacting to what everyone else wants." And that, perhaps, was the most significant change of all. 1 month later, I stood in the driveway of my apartment building, jingling a new set of car keys in my hand. The modest Toyota Corolla gleamed in the summer sunshine, not brand new or luxury branded, but reliable, practical and most importantly, actually mine. I'd purchased it 2 days ago after receiving the first rental income payment from the Maple Street duplex. So much had changed in 4 short weeks. The property transfer had been completed with surprising efficiency, thanks to Michael Bennett's connections. The fraudulent accounts in my name had been closed, with credit bureaus removing the negative marks after reviewing Haley's notarized confession. I'd opened new bank accounts at a different institution and implemented every security measure available: credit freezes, 2-factor authentication, fraud alerts. But the biggest changes weren't financial. They were personal. The door to my building opened, and Jessica emerged, carrying a cardboard box of donuts. She'd been my rock throughout the aftermath, helping me navigate legal documents and offering emotional support when family pressure intensified. "Ready for your housewarming party?" she asked, nodding toward the car with a smile. "Is it still a housewarming if it's for a car?" "Car warming doesn't have the same ring to it," she quipped, sliding into the passenger seat as I unlocked the doors. We were heading to Grandma's house, the first family gathering since the confrontation. I'd maintained limited contact with most relatives while focusing on rebuilding my financial foundation. Some family members had reached out with genuine support, others had pushed for immediate reconciliation with Haley, suggesting I was being vindictive by keeping my distance. Through it all, I'd held firm to the boundaries I'd established. Yes, I'd signed the restitution agreement. No, I hadn't filed a police report, a decision I'd made after considerable thought. But I'd also made it clear that rebuilding trust would take time, if it happened at all. As we drove, Jessica studied my expression. "Nervous about seeing everyone?" "A little," I admitted. "Especially Haley." My sister had moved back with our parents as planned. She'd surrendered the fraudulently obtained car, accepted a demotion at work that came with reduced pay but more regular hours, and according to my mother, was seeing a therapist to address her issues with impulse control and entitlement. The first monthly payment had arrived in my new account exactly as scheduled. "You know," Jessica said carefully, "nobody would blame you if you decided to keep your distance permanently." I considered this as we turned onto the familiar road leading to Grandma's farmhouse. I'm not ready to write her off completely. We grew up together. There were good times too. I paused, but I'm also not willing to pretend nothing happened just to make family gatherings more comfortable. "That's fair," Jessica nodded. "And pretty mature, all things considered." The farmhouse came into view, looking more welcoming than it had during our last visit. Fresh paint brightened the exterior, and Grandma's summer garden was in full bloom. Several cars were already parked in the driveway, including my parents' sedan. Grandma met us at the door, her face lighting up when she spotted the donut box. "Perfect. I made coffee." She ushered us inside, then paused, studying me intently. "You look different, Rebecca." "New haircut," I offered, touching the shoulder-length bob I'd splurged on at a proper salon rather than the discount place I'd used for years. "It's not just that." Grandma shook her head. "There's something else. A confidence." She was right. The past month had transformed me in ways beyond this superficial. Standing up for myself, refusing to be pressured into quick forgiveness, making decisions based on my needs rather than others' expectations, these actions had awakened something that had been dormant for too long. The gathering was smaller than the ill-fated barbecue, just my immediate family, Jessica and Harold. Haley was already seated in the living room when we entered, her usual designer outfit replaced by simple jeans and a plain blouse. She looked up as I walked in, anxiety clear in her expression. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," I replied, taking a seat across from her rather than beside her. Conversation was awkward at first, everyone carefully avoiding mention of the situation that had brought us to this point. Mom talked about her students' end-of-year projects. Dad described problems with a construction site. Harold dozed intermittently in his favorite armchair. Normal family stuff, except for the undercurrent of tension. After lunch, Grandma surprised everyone by announcing she had something to share. She disappeared into her study, returning with a large photo album I'd never seen before. I've been thinking about family legacies, she began, opening the album on the coffee table, about what we passed down besides money or property. Inside were photos I'd never seen. Grandma as a young woman, looking remarkably like Haley, standing beside a severe-looking older woman. This was my mother, Grandma explained. Your great-grandmother. She was difficult. Played favorites with her children, used money to control us all. She turned a page, revealing more vintage photos. I swore I'd never be like her, but patterns repeat unless we consciously break them. She looked directly at Haley, then at me. I created an environment where one grandchild felt entitled to take whatever she wanted and another felt she had to earn every scrap of recognition. That's my responsibility to bear, Grandma, I began, uncomfortable with her public self-recrimination. She held up a hand. Let me finish. What happened between you two didn't happen in a vacuum. But, she added, fixing Haley with a stern look, understanding causes doesn't excuse choices. Haley, you alone are responsible for the decisions you made. Haley nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I know. And I'm trying to make amends. She turned to me. I started reading about identity theft victims, the stories. I never thought about how it affects people long-term. Not just financially but emotionally. The violation of trust, the feeling that your identity isn't fully yours anymore. She swallowed hard. I did that to my own sister. It was the first time she'd acknowledged the emotional impact of her actions, not just the financial cost. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. It helps. Later, as everyone moved to the patio for coffee, Grandma pulled me aside again. I have something else for you, she said, pressing an envelope into my hand. Inside was a set of keys different from the ones to the duplex. What are these for? The lake house, she replied. Harold, and I don't use it much anymore. The deed transfer is already in process. I stared at her in shock. The family lake house was worth at least $500,000. Grandma, this is too much. The duplex was already more than enough. It's not about balancing the ledger, she said firmly. It's about acknowledging your worth. For too long, I measured success by Haley's standards, social connections, appearance, charm. I failed to value your kind of success, hard work, integrity, persistence. She squeezed my hand. Consider it an investment in the family member who's most like my father, the best man I ever knew. Driving home that evening, windows down and warm summer air rushing through the car, I felt a profound sense of peace settling over me. The past month had been painful, revealing ugly truths about my family and forcing difficult decisions. But from that pain had emerged something valuable, a stronger sense of self-worth, clearer boundaries, and the knowledge that I could advocate for myself effectively. I hadn't fully forgiven Haley yet. That would take time and consistent evidence of changed behavior. But I'd chosen not to let her betrayal define me or poison my other relationships. I'd found my voice and used it to demand the respect I deserved. As for the future, for the first time in my adult life, it looked genuinely bright. The property income would allow me to pay off my remaining student loans within a year. I could take vacation time without financial stress. I could even consider switching to day shifts at the hospital, something I'd wanted for years but couldn't afford due to the night differential pay. More importantly, I discovered a resilience within myself that no betrayal could break and no external validation could replace. The hardest lesson of this ordeal had become the most valuable. True self-worth comes not from family approval or financial security, but from honoring your own boundaries and standing firmly in your truth, regardless of the cost. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your kindness? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. This journey has taught me that speaking your truth, even when it's difficult, is the first step toward healing. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to advocate for yourself when needed.